Good morning. This is Glenn Stevens with MICHauto and the Detroit Regional Chamber. Just wanted to thank everybody for joining our COVID teletown hall today. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for our guest time today. Just one piece of housekeeping for everybody. If you have a question, we have about 15 minutes for questions. Please enter it into the chat box you'll see on the right there, and Devin O'Reilly from our team is going to join us, and he'll be asking some Q&A. So with that, we're just going to jump right in, and I'm going to welcome Tom Kelly, who is the Executive Director and the CEO of Automation Alley. Tom, it's good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Glenn. I love the dramatic entrance.
Well, like I said, next time we'll have a drum roll for you.
Even better. I love it.
But thanks for joining us today.
You betcha.
So I think as background, most people know Automation Alley, but why don't you give them the elevator pitch and just tell us a little bit about the background and where you're at today.
So Glenn, Automation Alley is Michigan's Industry 4.0 Knowledge Center. For the last 5 years, we've been focused on shifting from sort of Oakland County economic development, which is kind of what we were known for 15 years, to this new theme of saying, look, our brand is Automation Alley, and we need to focus on all things automation. In fact, our brand outside the region globally was very strong, and people knew us as automation experts. And yet we were not known about as that in Michigan. And so when I came in, like I said, a couple of years ago, we said, we're going to pivot and we are going to become the true knowledge center we were kind of destined to be, which is how do we understand AI? How do we understand 3D printing, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of these technologies that are fundamentally changing how manufacturing operates and the business models of manufacturing. We need guidance in the state. And there was nobody really doing that. And Glenn, you and I talked about this years ago. You were one of my mentors when we talked about what does the strategy need to look like. So I put our flag in the ground and said, we are going to stand for that. And it has paid huge dividends, I think, for us, for the state, for our members, just in terms of creating an ecosystem of understanding around Industry 4.0.
Well, I don't think anybody would argue that the conception of Automation Alley, Brooks Patterson, and the previous leadership did a phenomenal job. Phenomenal job. But what you've done with your team, and Cynthia and everybody, I give you a lot of credit because it's about focus, right, and priorities. And you guys have done that. Your team has done that. You've doubled and tripled down on this. And for example, when we talk to companies and people, and they say, well, we want to learn more about Industry 4.0, we say, go talk to Tom and his team. That's where it is. And we appreciate your partnership. So what is for all of us the definition or what is Industry 4.0? Just give us some context.
Yeah, so the 1 minute definition is Industry 4.0 is the fourth industrial revolution. First was steam, and that created new engines like trains, right, locomotion, and changed transportation and the delivery of goods. Industry 2.0 was we all recognize as Henry Ford in the assembly line, and at the same time it kind of met electricity, which created even more efficient machines. Industry 3.0 was computers and robotics kind of came on the scene at the same time. And in every one of these revolutions, the way work was done before in manufacturing and the way work was done after in manufacturing were fundamentally different. The way you made money, the business models fundamentally changed. And so we're positing with lots of like-minded thought leaders around the world that we're in what we call a fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0. It's going to change how manufacturing is done. And what's scary for us, Glenn, is Michigan invented the second industrial revolution, and we dominated clearly the third because it was kind of a play on the second. The business model didn't change, it just became a lot more efficient. And everybody learned how to lean their operations out with automation. Well, now we're entering a phase that's very dangerous for Michigan because the business models around manufacturing are going to change in the fourth industrial revolution. And we need to make sure Michigan owns that story globally. We need to dominate the fourth the same as we did the second and third.
Well, I think that everybody understands our role with automotive leadership and our role with manufacturing leadership. And now if you haven't heard the word mobility, you've probably been living under a rock. But it's really, really important to us. But the role that Industry 4.0 plays in all this is essential. So we're going to come back to that with Devin and myself at the end. But what we really want to delve into right now with you is your role, our organization's role, and your thoughts on manufacturing and Industry 4.0 in this time of COVID. So let's start from the big picture with regards to the pandemic and global manufacturing. Your thoughts on where we're at right now and what you've seen just in 6 months, or actually longer if you think about some of the continents and countries.
Yeah, so Glenn, at the start of this pandemic, as it's really started to take hold and everybody started to work from home, manufacturing was hit very hard because manufacturing is a capital intensive business and you tend to need to be where you are in your plant to make product. And so if you don't have workers, you can't make product. And what we're going to see, and this is beginning to happen over time, is we're figuring out how to live in this age of COVID and still be able to make product. In fact, the OEs were very good at figuring out how to do social distancing and still have the assembly lines going. But if you're smaller, which is the bulk of our audience around the state of Michigan, small manufacturers, they're not so lucky in that regard, in that they don't necessarily have the resources or the know-how to be able to make that transition. But Industry 4.0, if they would take the time to understand with us what's possible, there are lots of digital technologies available today that allow you to change the way you work in a way that you can get that flexibility, you can get that agility, you can be resilient in the face of this change, and you can continue to make product, not just at where your manufacturing facility, but possibly new modes of manufacturing, like home-based manufacturing, which we're starting to talk about as a real viable alternative, that you're actually taking pieces of your plant and it's efficient to keep them all together, but in times where you need resilience and agility, you can break those pieces apart and take them home. It really blows the mind what's possible.
Right. Well, I was talking to a company the other day. Actually, I talked to two companies that are using the Microsoft HoloLens technology.
Absolutely.
Something like that, which, you know, we think about virtual reality and goggles to be able to play a video game, but this company is sitting in Troy, but looking at their manufacturing operations in Germany, real time.
And I think that if you're smaller, you tend to see that as, oh, that's what a large tier one would do, or that's what an OE does, because they're big and they have lots of IT resources. And what we need to impress upon the audience today, Glenn, is those technologies are cheap. Anybody can afford those technologies. You're limited by your imagination. And what's risky for us as a society in Michigan is our imagination tends to always focus back to what we're really good at, which is Industry 2.0 and 3.0. So we envision a world where we do Industry 2.0 and 3.0 a little better than we do it today. And what we need to impress upon people is, no. You need to break that model, that mindset. And COVID, for all the tragedy that is in this pandemic, COVID broke our mindset of what is truly possible in a digital world. We're all working from home and everybody went, gosh, I'm more productive than ever. I can't believe, and my work life is better, and my home life is better. And everybody is, of course, if you're a white collar professional, everybody's saying this is wonderful. You know, blue collar had it rougher because, again, the assets all tended to be tied to Industry 2.0 and 3.0. But we're going to see this cultural change, and we need to make sure that our smaller manufacturers embrace what has been thrust upon them.
I would agree with you, except if you are on the first day of school with a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old today, and you're at home. Your home life may not be better today.
Yes, and God bless those people. I thank my stars. My children are 14 and 12, so they're just at that age where they can kind of navigate themselves. In fact, they can teach me some tricks about technology. But you're right. It's this COVID pandemic has changed how everything is done, and culturally, we haven't adjusted yet. Humans haven't even figured out, what does this mean? How do I create the social fabric at the same time we're distanced? And that's all remains to be worked out. But everything is kind of changing at the same time. And this is a risk for our manufacturers, especially the smalls, because there is no opportunity to sort of incrementally make those, which is what we were doing, Glenn. We're making incremental changes, and then we're trying to teach them where they need to go, and boom, the world changed, and now everybody is focused on rapid change. So you've lost the competitive edge to move slowly.
Well, it used to be that the big discussion was, are there more than one or two slices in your customer mix pie? For example, did you do business with one or two customers, and how did you diversify? Now it's not only that, it's how are you doing business differently to compete on a global scale? To talk about the smalls, you and your team and some partners have been very involved in support through a grant program for the small manufacturing companies. Can you tell us about that?
So we were fortunate, Glenn, that we received a grant through the federal CARES program from Oakland County and Macomb County. 10 million from Oakland County, 2 million from Macomb County. That's a lot of money. The gist of the program is this: we are authorized to stand up to 350 small manufacturers with either some version of 3D printing or some version of light assembly. Think HoloLens, think light guide systems, you know, the assembly tables, using augmented reality, i.e. things like zero instruction, so someone can learn right away how to do new products. What we're trying to build, we're going to overlay on these 300 assets out in the field a blockchain network that allows us to have high security, allows us to do micropayments, and it allows us to connect up all of those printers as one functioning entity. Think about that, Glenn. We can have 350 small manufacturers behave as a large tier one. That's what was missing in additive, the ability to create scale out of nothing. And if you have additive coupled with augmented reality light assembly, coupled with a mechanism that is safe, secure, and allows micropayments to be distributed, the only thing missing is logistics. Instead of having one huge capital asset building making 350 components an hour, I now have 350 facilities with no capital assets making 350 components an hour. Now my problem is logistically, I have to collect them all up and get them to the right OE or tier one. And guess what? If there's one thing that America knows how to do, it's move stuff. So we think that this has a real opportunity to fundamentally change the way the world thinks about manufacturing. And we've always believed Michigan needs to create and own the fourth industrial revolution. And we think it starts with this project. And we're so thankful to Oakland County and Macomb to have the vision to see what is possible and to say, Tom, we're going to give you some money to invest and see what happens. So we don't know where this is going to go, Glenn. This is way out in front of the world, but we're hoping that we can pull this off.
Well, and again, back to the circumstances of the pandemic are tragic, but we've seen silver linings and we've seen opportunity come, and this is a perfect example. This is more than an experiment, but it is in a way, and you're right about our logistics capability. We're very strong on it, particularly here in this region. I've been to Light Guide Systems, by the way, and was just corresponding with Paul the other day. And I think they're one of the companies you've been working with on this grant program. So
you got it. Yeah, Paul's been great to work with. He gets it. And so the idea is we're going to have a network where if we push a red button, all 350 printers and Light Guide Systems start making PPE, all of them. And that's how we qualify for how do we make sure that we have a network that, like the Defense Production Act, we can commandeer in a time of crisis. But the idea is to go beyond that and say, look, we're probably not going to need PPE in 6 months. So let's build a network that says, I can push that red button and make anything. Yep. Now we're limited by our creativity. And by the way, auto is hard because you got the whole quality and high volume, but there are parts in consumer goods, there are parts in medical devices, there are parts in aerospace. We need to go after all those markets and say, this is where you come to be able to make those kinds of parts. And it's a way to diversify. You asked, right? Hey, you have one customer or two customers. How did you diversify? I want manufacturer owners to go, printer's running again. I don't know what it's making, but it's making me money, Glenn. I got to put it in a bag and wait, and Amazon's going to pick it up and aggregate it somewhere. I don't care. Or a drone will pick it up. Take it to a central location.
You and I have talked about this because a lot of people, how many times in our lives have we heard the words, We need to diversify away from our traditional businesses, our automotive businesses. And I say no. I say what you do is you use the platform you have to diversify. And
Exactly.
with all the things that we know how to design, engineer, and make here, including automobiles and SUVs and pickups, why not use the technologies that are already integral to that process, which are mostly Industry 4.0 technologies, into other markets? And it should happen here. So I know we're on the same page. So it's
Yeah,
exciting.
and what we love about this, Glenn, is I can give them a printer that doesn't mess up. I'm not asking them to change their business process for their cash cow. All I'm saying is, look, you're experts in manufacturing. Let's drop a printer in, and if we can make you money with a product you wouldn't have been in before, everybody's learning and winning in that equation. So we're very hopeful that this will gain traction. And of course, once you build the network, hanging the 351st printer on is a no-brainer.
Right.
The 400th, exactly. The 500th, right? It's going to change how manufacturing is done.
Good. I want you to tell us, before we get to Devin, a little bit about a special thing that you've been involved in with the World Economic Forum and the future production meetings. I had not heard about that until I knew you were involved. Can you tell us about that and what it means to Automation Alley, but what it means to Michigan?
Yeah, you know, so we're not doing a very good job of marketing ourselves sometimes, Glenn, and that's because there are 12 advanced manufacturing hubs around the world. Automation Alley is one of them. And even more spectacularly for our region, we were the first. And so we have a partnership with the World Economic Forum where we are sending Cynthia Hutchison, who I think everybody, you know, a lot of people on this call know. She is going to actually go to Geneva in October and help head up the future of production for the World Economic Forum. This is such a feather in the cap of Michigan. You know, Michigan used to sit back and we used to call it a flyover state, right? Where all the innovation happens is not in Michigan. Well, I say nuts to that. We're actually going to be at one of the largest thought leaders in the world. They do Davos, for gosh sakes. Anybody who is anybody is part of the World Economic Forum. And we are going to have a seat at the table helping to define strategy of what the future of production looks like. And what's a benefit for Michigan is twofold. One is all the knowledge that is being created on a global basis and rolls up to the World Economic Forum, we're going to have access to that we can disseminate out to all of our community members in Michigan here. And secondarily, we get to influence how the world thinks about Michigan, right? We got to get more manufacturers to come to Michigan. And I love that we are the auto capital of the world, but we need to be the manufacturing capital of the world. And I think if we do it right, if we do these 3D printers and we do thought leadership at the World Economic Forum, I think we have an ability to compete and win against the largest manufacturing bases in the world, like China, like Germany, right? Like Mexico. Once you automate and you take the low skilled labor out of the equation and it becomes a higher skilled labor, we can compete with anyone in the world.
Good. Well, we'll look forward to hearing more about that and working with you on that. So absolutely. I know we've got some questions. Devin, I'm going to bring Devin O'Reilly on. Devin is in the mix with the entrepreneurship and the startup activities in our whole region. So Devin, I'm going to turn it over to you for a little bit here, and I'll click back on in a minute.
Great. Thanks, Glenn, and thanks, Tom, for doing this.
You bet.
Absolutely. So as Glenn mentioned, I work a lot in kind of the startup world in the Detroit area in Michigan. And so, you know, I'm aware, and I've visited this cool place, Lean Rocket, and I understand that, you know, you're in a partnership with them. So can you talk a little bit about Lean Rocket, what they do, and the nature of the partnership that you have with them?
Yeah, so it's a partnership not only with Lean Rocket, but with Centropolis up in Southfield. So we got together, the three of us, Automation Alley, Centropolis, Lean Rocket, and we formed, all of us are doing the same general things in terms of trying to accelerate businesses, startups related to Industry 4.0 technologies. And so when you see Lean Rocket's ecosystem and all the manufacturers they have swirling in their ecosystem in Jackson, and you look at Centropolis and what Dan Radomski is doing with that team in terms of hardware and platforms related to Industry 4.0 technology, and of course Automation Alley as Michigan's Industry 4.0 Knowledge Center, It was a real natural fit. And we have a $2.5 million fund, and we have 1.5 million that is still being invested. In other words, it's available for investment. We have already made $1 million in investments in companies. We have $1.5 million to really kickstart how the world comes to us in terms of creating leverage for these hardware startups related to Industry 4.0. And if we can get the software companies to be here and the hardware companies related to I4O to be here, we have all the manufacturers that we can connect them with to create a sticky ecosystem, right? We think that it can be sticky. And so Lean Rocket has been awesome to work with Centropolis, and together we formed this triumvirate called the Automation Alley I4O Accelerator.
It's awesome. And so that's kind of leads me into the next question, or something you can expand upon in that. There's a lot of natural advantages that we have here in Michigan. A lot of infrastructure that's already built, a lot of kind of relationships that have already been built. And so I think when people think about what we have here as far as an asset map, sometimes people just think about Detroit, and they may just think about Ann Arbor as kind of innovation centers. But for instance, Lean Rocket is in Jackson, Michigan. And you mentioned Centropolis in Southfield. Can you talk a little bit about how you think at Automation Alley and yourself think about our asset map here in Michigan, and why it's so powerful that we have these different nodes that are all kind of interconnected?
Yeah, well, and Grand Rapids is agriculture and med devices, right? And so if you look around the state, there are different pockets, food processing. In Kalamazoo, it's pharma, right? There's these pockets of knowledge and talent that exist all throughout Michigan, but they all are going to be impacted by the fourth industrial revolution. And we all share a common baseline in terms of artificial intelligence. So if you think about Southeast Michigan, if I say AI, your brain will immediately think mobility, right? It'll immediately say, oh, hey, we're, autonomous vehicles, that's what we do. But AI, as it applies to autonomous vehicles, has huge implications for how it applies to factories, right? Because that same AI you would use to do forecasting and predicting and validation are the same things you need to do in a plant. And so we need to create this ecosystem, and Automation Alley's role is to help stitch this all together so that we're having one conversation. It's not that you're in the food industry, or that you're in logistics, or that you're in defense, or that you're in aerospace or automotive. All of us need to be having the same conversation and cross-sharing, and it really comes from the technology layer, not the business process layer, because everybody's business process is going to get blown up by these new technologies. So we need to start from a new frame of reference, which is what can I do with the technologies that I have?
Exactly. And do you see that, and I imagine you do, as an inherent advantage if we think about from a startup company, a new and innovative technology, or a new and innovative manufacturing startup that's looking to focus somewhere, whether California, the coast, wherever that may be? Michigan has, or I guess I should ask you, do you feel like we have that advantage in terms of that cohesion in our network, and we're a little more interconnected, and we're a little more all playing on the same team than you might find in the Valley or in New York or Boston?
So that's a really great question, Devin, and here's an honest answer. Like a dam holding back a river, we have potential in Michigan to be fantastic in how we apply innovation and how we attract innovation, especially as it relates to Industry 4.0. We tend to not release that dam. The water tends to be held back. We tend to be so focused on the competitive nature of the automobile industry or the ag industry or the food processing. We forget that we're all in the same boat in terms of technology washing over all of us. And in Silicon Valley, it's in some ways it's still easier because their mindset is, I'm blowing everything up all the time. And so it's a constant state of iteration. And we're not really comfortable with that, because in our world in manufacturing, iteration is the killer of quality and volume, right? You can't be iterating all the time or you make crappy parts. You need to lock the system down and then not touch the system and then monitor it and make sure you're very careful. And yet we're asking you, but on the innovation side, you need to be constantly experimenting, constantly bringing in new technology. And it's just culturally, we haven't gotten our arms around how do we do that? And we're going to have to slowly nurture that part of ourselves that says, I'm okay with blowing stuff up. In fact, I need a chief blower upper. And somebody that just goes around and says, I need to blow that up, need to blow that up. And you say, well, okay, how do I build a process where I can dual track it and I can see what happens while I keep my production going and my cash cow going, but I need to blow stuff up because there is no time to waste on this. It is happening around the world as we speak.
So Chief Demolition Officer, I think we just created a new position.
That's a good one. I like that. Yep, Chief Demo.
Absolutely. So we had another question from the audience. Someone had asked, due to the disruption experienced in the supply chain due to COVID, how will Industry 4.0 impact bringing back the supply chain to the U.S.?
So that's a really great question. So you may like the answer, you may not like the answer, but let's take one specific thing we're trying to do at Automation Now, and that's build this 3D printing network, this additive manufacturing network. Once you move products from subtractive to additive, you are unshackled from the limits of the subtractive process, right? You can design anything you want, and you can design it continuously. The part one looks one way, part two could be completely different, which opens up the world of mass customization. If you begin to move Michigan to a more additive manufacturing stance, the advantage of having huge plants that are very capital intensive and rely on very low cost labor, that advantage goes to zero. And so if you think about Michigan versus China, the reason why we had such a difficult time from 2000 to 2016 was because we didn't have an answer to very high volume, very capital intensive, very low cost labor advantages. In fact, it was exactly opposite of what we're good at. If America gets back to being able to be mass customization, one-offs, additive manufacturing, where I can make anything at any time for anyone, that plays right into our hands. And the rubber band on production has been pulled so tight. China now controls 25% of all the production in the world. When that rubber band snaps back, you are going to see manufacturing come back to Michigan, come back to North America, absolutely, for sure. It's very slow right now. It's a trickle because it's very hard to move assembly, move manufacturing. But you'll see this over time. The wind is at our back for the first time in decades. And we need to take advantage of that because the rest of the world's not going to wait. They're also moving quickly.
Sure. One more quick question we have from the audience that I want to get to. About in regards to workforce training. What topics should be, or do you think should be added to traditional engineering curriculum to support Industry 4.0? So supply chain management, blockchain, cybersecurity, what do you think needs to be added to our traditional curriculum?
Yeah, again, it's a tough problem, but it's all of the above. What we need is a systems approach to engineering and all facets. So let me take engineering as an example, because when you get down to the skilled trades, it equally ties back to what we're designing and how we're designing it. So if you think about engineering, I came out of school as an electrical engineer. I didn't know anything about mechanical engineering, chemical engineering. I didn't know about other disciplines and how it all fits together. Today, we need engineers that understand 3D printing and artificial intelligence and virtual reality and how I'm going to do these new materials that are being invented every single day. You need a very holistic view on all facets of manufacturing, that it's moving beyond compartmentalized knowledge that you own and someone bolts onto. Those days are over. They're dead. You need someone that understands a little bit of it all. And how we do that is going to define whether we win or lose going forward. And because it's our talent that's coming in that's going to define how we compete on the world stage. And so if we don't get our academics fixed, and academic can be even slower than industry. Industry moves very fast because the customer votes with their wallet, whether they agree or disagree with your choices. In academia, it hasn't always been the case. And so they tend to move a lot slower, but we need to all work together to get this systems view into our mindset.
Absolutely. The short answer is all of it, but I appreciate the depth that you go into in describing that, and I share that sentiment as well. Let's bring back on Glenn, because we have to wrap up our great discussion here, but always good to talk to you, Tom.
I love the multi-camera angles you guys do. I feel like I'm on like channel 7 or something.
We've got it down to a science here at the
chamber. Man, it's great.
So I'll jump off, and Glenn, you can jump in.
Thanks, Devin. Appreciate it. Did I bring my audio back on, Tom? Because I always forget to do that.
I can hear you, yeah. Or I'm an excellent lip reader, one of the two.
So a couple things, Tom. First of all, thank you to you and to the audience that tuned in today, and Devin. We appreciate it. I want to give you a final question here, but just a reminder to everybody, it will be online. This session will be posted online. And September 10th is an upcoming one. That'll be Dr. Allison Weinman of Henry Ford Health System. She's an infectious disease specialist, and we'll be talking about the clinical trials and the vaccine process, which obviously there's nothing more important than that. But Tom, just
tuning into that one.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. Just to bring it back home, thank you for your time today. You know, I was going to ask you one question, but based on this conversation today, I would like your thoughts. You are an optimistic, energetic guy, but when you really look at all the things that we've been doing, and what caught me was this phrase, like a dam holding back a river.
Yeah.
How do we make sure we're not that dam, and how do we use this as a catalyst? And are you optimistic about that? I am, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Oh, I'm completely optimistic with you. I think leadership at all levels, whether it's OE, tier 1, tier 2s, leadership understands the pace of change in the world today. People that are living at the front lines, whether you're in healthcare or front lines automotive, front lines, people understand the pace of change. What we have is systems that have been built to manage a process. And so it's these middle managers that I'm calling out on this video that are not willing to take risks because there's no reward in taking risks. Upper management understands it. Upper management needs to do a better job of driving risk-taking, responsible risk-taking, right? We're not going to get into a whole theoretical course on what that means, but we need to take more risks. That's what we're missing here in Michigan. The ability to take a risk, a calculated risk, and live with the consequences, but almost always risk results in learning, and the iterative learning results in the innovation you seek. It's not the ROI model where you go to the CFO and the CFO says, how much does a project cost and what's my return? And if you can't document a return, you don't get funded. That's not how innovation works. You say, I don't know what the hell is going to happen with this 3D printing farm we're going to build, but I know it's going to be cool, and I'm going to learn a heck of a lot, and it's going to lead us to the next iteration that perhaps gets us to a point where we can win. We need more of that in Michigan. Less risk averseness, more risk taking. That's going to decide our fate.
Well, I appreciate that thought. And as you said before, and we've talked, culture built us, our culture, and culture can either enable you or hold you back. So thanks again for all the work you do and for your collaboration with the Chamber and MICHauto and the other organizations. And we'll look forward to continuing to build this with you and your team, Tom.
Thanks, Glenn. Keep up the great work, and thank you for having me today. I much appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody, for joining in, and we'll see you on the next Teletown Hall. And have a great day, and be well, everyone. Thank you.